Wentz steps up. Here comes the rush. He is going deep, and it is caught. And in for a touchdown, Deshaun Jackson.
Give the people what they want.
Reuben, looks like we're getting pretty close to the Eagles finding their next head coach.
It sure looks that way. I think might have something official in the next day or two, if not in the next minute or two.
Yeah, I mean, if Howie knows we're doing this, it's going to be probably in the next half hour or so as we're recording this. You guys might never hear this, so I don't know why I just said that. This is the Eagle Eye Podcast with Reuben Frank. I'm Dave Zangaro. All signs kind of pointing to Josh McDaniels. I don't think it will be a very popular hire, but he interviewed for a long time on Sunday in Palm Beach with Jeff Lurie, Howie Roseman, Don Spolensky, and other members of the front office. It's certainly seeming like there's a lot of momentum heading that way.
Yeah, no doubt about it. This, as soon as Gerard Mayo was named as a candidate, I remember. I'm gonna do one of my one-eye stories. One of way back stories. Back in the old Patriots Stadium, Schaefer Stadium in Foxborough. I remember being at a game and talking to Jeff Lurie on the field before the game in that stadium, and he was talking about how he almost bought the Patriots and how he grew up as a Patriots season ticket holder. Incredible that his family was able to scrounge up the money for tickets, and that's a joke, Dave. And he actually pointed out to me where his seats were. And they had those metal benches, like bleacher benches, like at a high school stadium in Schaefer Stadium. It was the most uncomfortable place. But you realize how deeply ingrained the Patriots franchise is to Jeff Lurie. I mean, he tried to buy the franchise before he bought the Eagles in the 90s. And, he's always been fascinated by Belichick, and he's always been fascinated by – I think that made the Super Bowl sweeter, certainly. So it does make sense that I think Mayo's name came up first before McDaniels, but it does make sense that he would go in that direction for a head coach. I don't particularly like it. I don't think it's a great move, but you can see you've always known that Lurie has a fascination with the Patriots, and he's never hired from the Belichick tree before, but sure looks like that's what's coming.
Yeah, and it's funny because just a couple years ago, McDaniels was a really hot name, and for good reason. I mean, he's had a ton of success in New England, and I guess it's hard to figure out how much of that's him and how much of it is Tom Brady. When they're having all these great seasons offensively.
Well, Brady did better than McDaniels when they weren't together. So
that's true, but I'll also point out that Patriots team this year had a lot of missing pieces, and I don't think it was that simple.
I mean, even when he went to Denver and the Rams, Brady kept doing his thing. But I'm sure he had. I mean, you can't hold it against the guy that he worked with a Hall of Fame quarterback.
Yeah, exactly, and he has gotten a lot out of some other players that aren't necessarily super talented. And you can also say Brady did that, but I think the coach has something to do with that. There's a reason he was hired before, or the reason he was hired twice as a head coach. He only ended up being a head coach once. That part of it is fascinating too, honestly. I wonder how much of their interview with Josh McDaniels was really trying to figure out if he wants this job, because that thing with the Colts a few years ago, it turned a lot of people off. I think he definitely burned some bridges when he backed out of that job.
Yeah, he's been hired for 2 head coaching jobs and coached a total of 28 games. So he's averaging 14 games per time he's gotten hired. So if he gets hired here, that'll go down to 8.7. But that's a red flag to me. And I'm sure. I mean, certainly the first thing I would ask. You got to question the guys. I mean, I'm not saying he would quit tomorrow or the next day, but you got to wonder about the guy's commitment. If he was that quick to leave the Colts at the altar, I just don't like that. That he did that. I don't like anybody who would think about doing that, and what it says about them. To me, that's a huge red flag. To me, that would be prohibitive. I don't think I could trust that guy.
Yeah, and I'm sure that was a big part of the interview, as well as the quarterback position. I mean, that's obviously a big deal. And I don't know if it would necessarily rule someone out if they thought they couldn't fix Carson Wentz, but it might. I mean, they're financially tied to this guy, and you'd want your head coach to think, yeah, we can fix this talented quarterback. I can fix him. But it's also worth pointing out the Patriots reportedly had a ton of interest in the pre-draft process in Jalen Hurts. Makes you wonder how much of that came from McDaniels.
That's true. A couple of thoughts. I mean, I think once it's public, once it's leaked that the Eagles want a candidate who wants to work with Carson, nobody's going to go in there and say, Jalen's my guy. So there's that. It's just, I mean, it's just a bad thing to get leaked out. But also, the Patriots they've never had elite talent really on offense other than, I mean, they had Randy Moss, but they've always had, a collection of running backs coming and going. They've always had different receivers.
That Gronk guy was pretty good.
What's that?
That Gronk guy was pretty good.
Gronk was pretty good. But they've never been loaded at all the skill positions. So that would prepare any coach to come here because Howie's going to sit there in the interview saying, get used to not having talent because I'm the GM. So, I think that would prepare him pretty well. But, I think Tom Brady would have been – Carson Walsh could have been his offensive coordinator, and he would have been the greatest ever, I think. So I just don't know. It's impossible to separate them. I mean, you don't want to hold it against him, but I don't know how much credit he really deserves. And, the other places he's been, he hasn't had much time. But, I mean, how do you get fired after 28 games? You get fired 12 games. He's the only guy in the last 30 years to get fired that early in his head coaching career, 12 games into his second season.
It didn't go well. I mean, it is fair to point out it was a decade ago.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you would hope he learned from that and changed.
Cote was just 3 decades ago, and I don't want to hire him.
Sure.
That's equivalency, I know.
I also think it's a point to bring up that Doug Peterson wasn't a very popular hire either, and we're getting ahead of ourselves because we don't know for sure it's McDaniels, but it's popularity of a hire doesn't matter. I don't want to say it's a crapshoot trying to hire a coach because that doesn't do service to all the work that goes into vetting these candidates, but no one knows. I mean, Adam Gase and Ben McAdoo were the Eagles' favorites in 2016, and who knows what they would have done here, but they were a disaster where they went.
Yeah, it's true. I remember being intrigued at the Andy Reid hire just because I had no reason not to be. The more you heard about him and learned about him, the more intriguing it was. With Doug, I mean, I'd been around Doug, so I just didn't know if it was – I just didn't know if it was a great fit. I just didn't but, he certainly came with, pretty good resume from Kansas City. I just don't know. I just don't know what's special about Josh McDaniels. Where all the other candidates, there was something about them, whether it was, Deuce's command in the locker room is already there, or Joe Brady's innovative offense, or, Todd Bowles, what he did in Tampa and what he's done really most of his career as a coordinator. Each candidate to me had something. I mean, you look at the guy in Buffalo, Brian. I mean, what he did with Josh Allen to me, and that offense overall makes him an incredible candidate. Every one of those guys, Eric Bieniemy. I mean, to be the offensive coordinator of under an offensive coach, but to be the offensive coordinator of the greatest offense maybe in NFL history. Every one of those guys has something about them that makes you say, "Wow, what he accomplished." And I look at Josh McDaniels, and other than Tom Brady, I just don't know what it is.
Well, I mean,
maybe that's not fair. Maybe he deserves.
I don't know if that's fair because I think you can kind of nitpick every candidate, and I understand. Like, I'm not saying it's going to be a good hire, but I think you can nitpick with every candidate, right? Like, you can look at Bieniemy and say, Well, how much is him? How much is Andy? You can look at Joe Brady and say, is he ready? You can do that with all these candidates. And with McDaniels, I think there are positives with McDaniels. You can't just discount the offensive success that team has had because of Brady. Can you? I don't think you can.
I guess you can't. You know what? You know what really scares me about him?
I mean, Jimmy Garoppolo ended up becoming another franchise's starter. Jacoby Brissett.
Garoppolo played well in the 4 games that he played there.
Brissett too.
But I look at him as a guy that's always played politics. He's always made enemies. He's always, and I feel like he's doing. I mean, I don't know. I'm not in the interview room. I don't know what's going on, but I can just see him going in there and telling Lurie and Howie exactly what they want to hear to get this job, as opposed to really. And I'm just going by what happened in Denver and what happened in Indianapolis. That, he's more. And I've been around coaches who are about playing politics and maybe not really as committed to the job, or maybe want the job for the wrong reasons. I just don't trust the guy. I think that's what my issue is.
Yeah, and I can't say that that's not credible. He hasn't really given us a reason to trust him. I don't know. I think it's an interesting hire. I do worry about the personality, and I worry about the stark difference in personality. And if you look back at the Eagles' hires recently, it seems like they do this. They went from Andy Reid to Chip. They're going from extremes. They went from Andy to Chip. Then they're like, oh, wow, that's too much this way. Then they went to Doug, which is really on the play. And now they're going to – it feels like they're just in this back and forth between
nice guy and hard ass.
Yeah, right? And it doesn't seem like you want to try to find a middle ground there. And I don't know if McDaniels is I think McDaniels is more hard ass. And it can be tough. It can be we saw it here with when Chip came, and I saw it when I was in Houston when they went from Kubiak to Bill O'Brien, who's another Belichick guy. That is a tough transition. And look, if you're going to do that transition, now is the time to do it because you're going to kind of turn over this roster. But if you make this hire, 2021 is going to be a tough year in that building because forget ice cream. Josh McDaniels isn't giving you ice cream. It's gonna be kind of a culture shock for the guys who were here under Doug Peterson. It just will be, and we've seen this before. It's the same thing. The guys who were here under Andy when Chip came. It doesn't mean you can't win, but it's the dynamic definitely changes.
Yeah, and whoever the new coach is going to have to win over, that veteran nucleus of. Fletcher, Kelsey, if he's here, which I would think if I'm Jason Kelsey, man, I don't want any parts of playing under Josh McDaniels, but I can't speak for him, but we'll see, especially if Staff's not here, man. But, Rodney, if he's here, if he's healthy, if he's playing, if he's around, BG, that whole group, I mean, he's got to win those guys over. That's going to be tough to do. That's going to be his biggest challenge. And, because if you do that, then the younger guys will follow me because all the young guys on this team follow that group of, even you throw Deshaun in there because, to us, he's just a guy that's always hurt. But to the young receivers, Deshaun is like, he's the man.
Yeah.
So you got to win those guys over. And that's a hard bunch to win over because they won a Super Bowl with Doug. So I just don't know how hard ass coming in, we're going to do it my way is going to play when these guys are like, hey, we just won a Super Bowl 3 years ago doing it this way. That's tough. Whereas I think some of the other coaches might not come in that. And I find him an abrasive guy. I've never been in a locker room with him, but we'll see. We'll see how it plays.
Yeah. And it's interesting. The Eagles wanted to interview Brandon Staley. They never got the chance. He gets hired by the Chargers. Really just 2 openings left. The Lions' job isn't official yet, but Dan Campbell's going to get that job. So it's really just the Texans and Eagles. The Eagles on Monday interviewed Todd Bowles. So I think that also points to it not being a completely done deal if you're still interviewing other candidates. The Texans virtually interviewed Eric Bieniemy on Monday. The latest we heard was that the Eagles hadn't had an interview scheduled with Bieniemy yet. That request was still active the last we heard. Kind of strange. You would think if both sides want an interview to happen, it wouldn't be all that hard to schedule it.
Especially, and we should mention this rule that the NFL has now where, in the past, if you were with a playoff team, you could only talk during a bye week, either if you had a first round bye, which this year is half as many teams, or the bye week before the Super Bowl, if there is one, and there pretty much is one every year now, or when the team lost. Now they changed it so you can interview virtually with a team if the coach's existing current team that's still alive in the postseason allows it. So maybe the Chiefs didn't allow Eric to do that. Well, obviously the Bucs allowed Todd Bowles to do it and other candidates. We don't know.
That's speculation, but it would be interesting because they allowed him to talk to the Texans.
Yeah, that is true. And maybe Andy's just at the point where, hey, I don't know who my quarterback's going to be. This it could have been scheduled before that game too, but. If they got to get Chad Henne ready for an AFC Championship game, Eric Bieniemy's focus probably shouldn't be on, studying the Eagles personnel right now. But the Bieniemy thing is crazy. I don't know if we should get into the tweet from his agent this morning, Monday morning, where he basically, and it wasn't from a person, it was from the agency. So it's kind of weird, but intimated that the Eagles had already agreed with Josh McDaniels and that they were no longer on, or Bieniemy was no longer on the Eagles' radar. This is his agent talking, so kind of assume that it's true. 6 hours later, the tweet hasn't been deleted or anything, so it's still up there. So kind of we stand by our story. Very unusual, I would think, unprofessional to do that. But purely speculating, if the Eagles told Eric Bieniemy, hey, we just finished interviewing Josh McDaniel and we're going to hire him, so we're going to cancel our interview or not schedule an interview with you, and Bieniemy tells his agent that, and they talk about it, and I mean it adds up, but we don't know that. And the other part of that is if you're Todd Bowles, you're sitting there. You got,
I got stuff to do.
Rodgers to prepare for, and you're sitting here going through an interview with a team that's already agreed to hire Josh McDaniels. That's kind of a waste of time. Bowles is doing the interview virtually, but still, you can't do that to Todd Bowles, a guy who was here in 2012. So I don't know. I don't want to make too much of that. It's kind of highly irregular for that tweet to exist and for an agent to do that. I mean, agents they'll tweet stuff when they feel wrong, but this is an active head coaching search. I don't think it reflects well on Eric either to do that. So kind of a strange situation, but it adds to the whole narrative that it looks like it's going to be Josh McDaniels.
This has been a weird coaching search.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously really it started weird because it began so late into this whole process. The Eagles were obviously the last team to enter it, and there's a reason why there's just two teams left. And you can argue these are the two least attractive jobs. Maybe the Lions are in there too, but
yeah,
I mean the Texans are kind of a mess.
Yeah, yeah. I sure as hell don't want to go work with Jack Easterby. I know that, but and I can't imagine Eric Bieniemy. I mean, first they said they didn't want to interview him, and then they did, and I don't know who they're going to end up with.
They just got pressured by their quarterback who doesn't want to be there.
Yeah, their quarterback who the new coach might not even end up working with. Yeah. They might just end up hiring Doug. They might end up hiring Marty. I see Marty being a candidate for that job. Yeah, it's been strange. I mean, to start out that late, somebody tweeted to me and asked if the Eagles have ever been this late hiring a coach. I mean, they hired. I sent you this. I mean, they hired Jerry. Was it Jerry? Not Jerry Williams, but the guy after him. I don't remember his name. In May, like the new owner, the team got sold. New owner fired Jerry Williams in May, and they hired a coach in May, and the guy who covered it wrote about the his chauffeur, which is kind of weird. But as I'm getting off topic, but you know what? You're better off waiting and hiring the right guy. I don't really have a problem with waiting.
Well, at this point, there's not much of a downside.
No.
I mean, you have to get ready for the draft and free agency, but that's the thing. It's like if McDaniels is your front runner, there was no harm for you if you're it might be harm for Todd Bowles if he's taken away from his work, but there's no harm in interviewing Todd Bowles or Eric Bieniemy or going through with a Kellen Moore interview. I mean, at this point, unless you think the Texans are going to swoop in and take McDaniels, or unless McDaniels says, hey, guys, I got to know by this date, what's the downside?
No, that's true.
There's a downside for me because I'd like them to hire a coach because we're going crazy during this coaching search. But for them, I get it.
Yeah, I think do your due diligence. And I mean, I like the way they've approached this search. I have no problem with talking to 10 people or 8 or whatever it is and talking offense and defense and guys from different coaching trees. And I think they've cast a wide net, and I think that's a positive. I just don't like Josh McDaniels. I never have. But I think they've approached it the right way. And in their defense, I mean, Jeff Lurie's hired 4 coaches. Ray Rhodes was coach of the year his first year, won 10 games and won a playoff game. Andy, obviously one of the greatest coaches of all time. Chip was coach of the year in 2013 and won 10 games his first 2 years. His downfall was being the GM. And I don't think I think there were other issues, but I don't think he was necessarily a bad hire. I think it just it got bad. And then Doug won a Super Bowl. I mean, Chip was coach of the year. Ray was coach of the year. Andy is the greatest coach ever and one of the top few. And Doug won a Super Bowl. And that's his 4 hires. So he's 4 for 4 the way I see it. Say what you will about Chip. You can give him that or not. But he's got a pretty good track record. So I do trust his judgment. And we'll see. We'll see what happens. And, again, we're talking like it's going to be McDaniels. That's not a done deal. Like you said, I think everything's pointing to it, but we'll see. I think in the next 48 hours we're going to know, because it probably be a lot sooner than that, because I mean there's nobody else to interview. I mean, if they're not going to interview Bieniemy, I mean, who's left out there?
Kellen Moore. I mean, he was the last one, unless they're still working on Lincoln Riley, trying to get him to take an interview. I mean. Yeah, it seems like we're kind of getting close to the end here. Yeah,
I mean, it was never going to be Lincoln Riley or Ryan Day. That was just a pipe dream. I mean, if you can just get him in the building to talk to you, that's a big plus.
Brian Daboll is staying in Buffalo now, so.
And he said that all along. I thought he would have been a hell of a candidate, but he's he will. I mean, he would have been at the top of my list, really. He's an
too, actually.
But, sorry?
Yeah, he would have been at the top of my list, too.
But, yeah, there's really they're running out of people to interview unless they come up with some new names. But I would think they're going to make their call soon. Hey, all month long, NBC Sports Philadelphia presents Headstrong, Men's Health and Sports. Headstrong, a series about men's health told through powerful stories involving the athletes we love. Learn more at NBCSportsPhiladelphia.com/headstrong.
Now, Reuben, if Josh McDaniels ends up getting hired, we're really getting ahead of ourselves, obviously, here, but he's been in the league a lot longer than Doug Peterson when Doug Peterson was hired. So and that was what part of the initial report from The Athletic was. He was coming into the interview with the Eagles with ideas for his staff. That part of it's a little interesting to me. I initially thought maybe the Eagles would hire somebody they could kind of force a staff on, almost like what they did with Doug. It doesn't seem like that would be the case with McDaniels. He's been around long enough. He has connections to people. I would imagine we'd see some connections to Patriots, whether that means he can lure Gerard Mayo or maybe Matt Patricia as a defensive coordinator. It kind of brings up scheme questions, but I think he has a better footing to put a staff around him than Doug did that first year.
Yeah, and I don't think Howie and Jeff really wanted to force coaches on anybody. I think they want a guy to come in and have ideas that they like for the staff, ideally. And they just didn't like Doug's idea for a staff. But Yeah, maybe Tom Brady retires and becomes QB's coach. Imagine that.
I don't think he's going to retire.
Tom Brady getting situated for the Zoom call. Dan Gelston, you're up first. Jamie Apodi, you're second.
I don't think Tom Brady needs to be a QB's coach.
Never know. Never know what he might want to do next. New challenge. But yeah, it is. Jeff Lurie's never even, as far as I remember, never even interviewed anybody from Belichick's universe, from his tree or anybody.
What do you make of his coaching tree? I did a look back at some of it's. Obviously, it's not as strong as Andy Reid's. There have been some failures, but
It's getting better.
It's getting better. I mean, the recent ones look pretty good. Brian Flores in Miami looks to be a pretty good coach. Joe Judge, I mean, the jury's still out, but I really liked what he did his first year. I think where a lot of the Belichick disciples went wrong was they went hardo too much, and look, Belichick's obviously kind of a gruff guy, but he has tender moments. And I think a lot of his assistants kind of forgot that. I mean, He does connect to his players. His players like him.
Yeah. No, I think there's a lot to that. They thought that what made Belichick great was that he was a hard ass.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not the case. He was a great coach who happened to be a hard ass sometimes. But that's not what made him great. And I think that was the failure of a lot of them.
And he has such a good sense of when to do it and when to pull back and how, like, he's always had that sense. And I don't know if you can just duplicate that.
Right. Yeah. You got to be yourself. You can't try to be anyone else. And I'm sure that was a big part of Daniel's pitch, was that, I'm not Bill Belichick. I'm going to be myself. Being from a certain coaching tree doesn't guarantee anything. I mean, I think Steve Spagnuolo, he's from the Andy tree, has the worst one-loss record of any coach in history, who I think might have been with Josh McDaniels. He might have been the head coach of the Rams when Josh McDaniels was there. Possibly. Spags. I have to look that up. But anyway, because I know they're really bad. I know they're really bad when Spags was their coach. But in any case, and I mean, there's other coaches from Andy's tree that haven't, Pat Shurmur has, being from Andy's tree certainly hasn't helped Pat Shurmur with the Browns or the Giants. He had the exact same record with both teams, by the way.
He is the most boring human on the planet, so that makes sense.
Yeah, he was like 9-23 in both jobs, that's got to be a record. But I wouldn't rule someone out just because they're from the Belichick tree. I don't. I think, like you said, Brian Flores is really impressive what he's done in Miami. Joe Judge has a chance to be. I like what he did. I like what he did with the Giants. So I wouldn't hold that against him. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, there have been some failures, but I mean, you can also, like, Matt Patricia obviously failed, Eric Mangini. But I mean, like, even Bill O'Brien, he's looked at as a failure now. He was an okay coach. He was an awful GM, and that's what got him fired. But as a coach, he was pretty good early.
I think Mangini is kind of the poster boy for, a guy trying to act like Belichick who just wasn't Belichick. Mm-hmm. He's kind of, him and Patricia are really the guys that have kind of tarnished that tree, I guess. But if it's McDaniel, I'll go into it with certainly if you've been around Bill Belichick for most of the last 2 decades, that's a lot of knowledge and wisdom and savvy. You can bring some of that here, or maybe it's not the worst thing.
What do you make of the other coaching hires around the league? I just want to go through them and kind of give me your thoughts. Urban Meyer in Jacksonville, that was their big fish, and they reeled him in. What do you make of that? Do you think he's going to be able to do this?
Yeah, I just don't see it. I think it'll be a disaster, honestly.
Really?
The guy just – he's had health problems. He's already talking about how he's got to take it easy at practice because of his health problems. These guys – this is not a job for somebody who's got to take it easy. maybe he'll be one of these guys that just surrounds himself with a great staff, and it looks like he's bringing in some good people from what I've seen so far. But I don't see it. I just don't see him. I mean, that's a job where you need a guy who's. That's a pretty big job. I mean, I understand they're gonna have a great player in there, but with the draft pick, but that's a monumental task turning that thing around, and I'm just not sure he's up for that right now.
I think the only reason they wanted him, and I kind of get it, like his big thing was always culture. Like maybe not the off the field stuff, but like within the football program, it was a culture. It was a culture of winning, and I think he needs to be surrounded by good coaches who can kind of handle.
It is to win at Ohio State, though.
Yeah, no, I get that, but I think that's what their aim is here. It is to kind of wash off the stink of that franchise and put a guy in there who is kind of bring a winning mindset. But I think he needs top assistants around him. So the next few hires there will be really important. Yeah,
no doubt about it.
All right, so the next one on the list, the Jets were the next team, Robert Saleh. I like this hire. Everything you hear about him is really great. It sounds like, Mike LaFleur is his OC. I like that too. It seems like he's an up-and-coming coach. This all makes sense to me, and I don't know if it's a lot. I mean, you're talking about tough jobs. Turning around the Jets is right at the top of that list, but
there's only one guy who's
like
won 10 games there in the last decade.
Yeah. I like Robert Saleh.
Todd Bowles went 10-6 there a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Then he proceeded to go like 4-12, 5-11, 4-12, but that's another story. Yeah, I like the hire. I don't really know. I've never met the guy. I don't know him, but he's impressive. Did a hell of a job with that Niners defense. D'Amico Ryans gets his job as D coordinator. D'Amico is going to be a head coach one day. I wish he was on the Eagles' radar. I don't understand why he wouldn't be.
Yeah, I don't know. It won't be long for him.
Yeah. But, yeah, I think that's a good hire. I think the Jets are they got to figure out who their quarterback is. But
it sounds like Sam Darnold.
Yeah, well, it's going to be hard to win with him. I don't think he's that good, so we'll see.
Falcons' Arthur Smith interviewed with the Eagles. The Eagles really liked him from what I heard. Didn't get a chance to go much deeper into that. He was always the Falcons' top target, and they went out and got him. What do you make of him?
He's impressive. That's another place where, they've got to figure – I mean, if they've had the same quarterback for 15 years, and I don't know how much longer, Matt Ryan can play. Still pretty good, but all these jobs, it comes down to who your quarterback is, right? So
a lot of the time, yeah. And really the GM there too, because Dimitrov is gone, so.
Yeah. So, but, I mean, I think it's a solid hire. I think it's a guy that if the Eagles had hired Arthur Smith, I'd be really happy.
Yeah. How about the Chargers and Brandon Staley? He was supposed to interview with the Eagles. The Chargers put an end to that by hiring him. Now, this was a surprise because we had heard that Brian Dable was the favorite in I almost said San Diego, in L.A. I was a little surprised to see Brandon Staley get hired. For me, it came out of the blue because I was still under the impression Dable was the favorite.
Yeah, same here. He's one I'm not really sure of because he's got such a short resume. I mean, he was only what was he coordinator there? 2 years, 1 year? Oh,
1 year.
1 year, right? So that worries me a little. And I had the same concern with Joe Brady, who obviously what he did at LSU was incredible, but he was only there 1 year, and then he was only with Charlotte 1 year. Those guys are intriguing, but you got to look at that lack of experience. That's something obviously Josh McDaniels doesn't have. But yeah, I'm that hire I'm a little suspicious of. I just don't know.
Yeah, and you have the number one defense with maybe the greatest defensive player. He's putting himself on a short list there of the greatest ever, so a little easier to have great success. They have a good team. I don't know. That one I'm curious about. Then the Lions, Dan Campbell. I mean, he looks like he might be their best player if they put him on the field. That guy. I mean, he's huge.
Yeah. And again, I got confused because I thought it was Dan Campbell, the lead singer of Wonder Years, but it's apparently a different guy. Dan Campbell is a huge Eagles fan, the Wonder Years singer, and actually is comes to a lot of Eagles games. So there's obviously that's why the whole league was so confused about it. But yeah, I think it's a solid hire. I like what I've read, what I've heard about him. That's a tough place to win. You know,
I don't know. That's the one to me that I don't know. Who knows? I mean, we've all been so wrong about coaches before, but that's of all these hires, that's the one I look at and go, "That's your guy." And look, I understand that people kind of rave about him, who've been around him, and that matters. But he's kind of reminds me of a few of these hires. Like, it's interesting. You can put Urban Meyer. I mean, Sal obviously has a great pedigree as a defensive coach, but he's also kind of no, I don't want to say rah-rah because that minimizes what it means, but they're energetic, exciting coaches that guys want to play for. And Dan Campbell fits that mold too. I mean, they're not Pat Shermer, droopy eyes looking at you. Go win one for the Gipper here.
Yeah, Pat's imagine. I mean, I've seen Pat get fired up, but usually one time was when the coffee machine in the press box wasn't working. He was hot. But who's going to be the first guy to get fired?
Ooh.
Let's say Josh McDaniels. He hasn't even been hired yet.
Hasn't hired yet. I mean, history kind of tells you. Oh, I don't know. There have been some turnover with a few of these teams. Yeah. I mean, the Falcons were pretty patient with Dan Quinn, so maybe not Arthur Smith. I think Urban Meyer's going to have a little bit of a leash here with that quarterback. Yeah, I think he lasts 2 years. He might resign. That'll be like a mutual agreement. Yeah, I could see that. You going with Urban Meyer? Yeah, I'm going to Herb. Interesting. Yeah. I mean, if Campbell? No, because I think he's a good guy. It's harder to fire a good guy that quick. If you're Chip, see ya. That's why Andy Reid told me once he didn't know any of the coaches that he hired on his initial staff. Like, he just learned about them, read about them, and hired them. I asked him why. He said, never hire your friends, because it's a lot harder to fire your friends. That's true. It's good advice. And that first staff he put together was incredible. Yeah. Yeah, in fact, I guess it's now, well, if Bieniemy or Deuce ever gets a job, they'll be the 9th player or coach from the 99 Eagles to get a head coaching job in the league. It's amazing. Because if you watched that season, you were thinking, what? Oh, my God. Well, like the 97 and 98 Eagles had like Sean Payton, John Gruden, and John Harbaugh. Yeah. And Bill Callahan. That's right. And they went, 3-13? So, you never know. You never know where that next great coach is coming from. That's what makes it fun. You got anything else? Do you enjoy the games this weekend or this past weekend? Yeah, I saw somebody tweeted how bad the games were, man. I love every one of them. I love watching playoff football. Man, I'll tell you what, Big Red's he's got a set, doesn't he? Oh, my God. He does. I mean, look, I want to give him credit for that play call at the end with your backup quarterback is gutsy. But he also put his franchise quarterback in harm's way. He did. I don't want to gloss over that. That was an awful decision. It was terrible. No, I totally agree. But to call that play with Chad Henne on 4th and inches, and for Henne to pull it off, I mean, that was – and the Romo call was great. It was incredible. He was incredulous. Yeah. He is the best. He is so good. There could be – but even when he gets it, like, completely wrong, it was still entertaining. I know. But I love how he, like, breaks down, like, okay, there's 7.5 minutes left. If they go 3 and out, there's going to be 4:45, and then they have 2 timeouts. So when they get the ball back, there'll be 1:45. They'll be able to run 2 plays, call time. Like, he's got, like – the next 20 – he's like a chess master who's got like the next 20 moves planned out. Andy should be listening to the broadcast for some of these games. I know. I was thinking that. Like, if Tony Romo was Andy's, like, play clock coordinator, Andy would never lose a game. Yeah, no, that's the part I like about Romo too. He has that internal clock that and he kind of figures like, and then that's like, you can't even do the math. Like you're just, that, okay,
Right.
there's, there's no way to, and that's just from years of playing and being that type of guy.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens.
to
I
me-
liked these games this weekend. I know they weren't the cleanest games, but they're pretty good.
Yeah, I loved it. It was a shame to see, Lamar Jackson get hurt and Mahomes get hurt. The Buffalo Ravens game was hard for me just because I mean, I've known those two guys, Harbs and Sean, for 20 years. But I picked the Packers and Bills, and I'm sticking with it. No matter who starts at quarterback for Kansas City, I'm going Bills, Packers, Super Bowl. I think we both picked the Packers to win, right?
We both picked the Packers. I picked the Chiefs. I'll be honest, if Mahomes doesn't play, I don't see them winning. So
Can't change your pick.
I'm not changing my pick. I'm sticking with the Chiefs, but I want an asterisk if you win. Because that's not fair.
Yeah. I mean, hopefully he's okay. I mean, a week is not a lot of time.
That was tough to watch, too. I mean, it was
like
having
the
trouble
Stuart Bradley
standing.
thing,
Yeah.
wobbling off the field. I'm guessing he's not going to be able to play. I don't know how you clear. I don't know. Maybe they'll figure.
Concussions, I mean, you never know.
Seen one concussion. You've seen one concussion, Dave.
How many times have we used that line on this podcast?
Hundreds.
If you enjoy the Eagle Eye podcast, do us a favor, rate and subscribe wherever you get your pods. If you're watching on YouTube, also hit that subscribe button. Our YouTube audience is growing. That's pretty cool, so we appreciate you guys there too. Anything else, Reuben?
No, we'll see you very soon.
Yeah, I mean, you guys might never hear this. Maybe while we've recorded this, they've already hired someone. For Reuben, I'm Dave. This has been Eagle Eye. We'll talk to you soon.